them who's boss.
Uh-huh.
And I went back and told Laura, I said, you're going to fire this guy.
Uh-huh.
So you might as well do it now. And she said, well, middle school is going to start in a week. What am I going to tell the parents? And I said, well, I'll step in for a little bit and I'll help.
Uh-huh.
And that was my introduction. And then for 13 years, I did that. But suddenly we have 3 of these schools now. We're going to have 10. And it just takes off. And fast forward to today, we have 18,000 people who have started an audition who want to start a school. We have 300 schools in 26 countries and 43 or 44 US states. And so we've built a model with all these wonderful entrepreneurial parents. And most of the people that run the schools are people like you and me that want to do it for their children. And it's a loose consortium. It's almost like building Legos or Unix, or it's a network that's continually changing a model. That's improving it. And so now we've got 300 people contributing to the improvement of the model, which changes really weekly, gets better. Almost all of it, though, handing more freedom and responsibility to the children.
Yeah, well, that's a great decentralized model, though, too, and we can get back to what that means on the cost front. So, okay, so now kid's 5, goes to one of your classes. You said that there's some formal learning taking place, so with regard to reading, and but there's a lot of play.
Well, so there's a lot of play. They're learning math on Khan Academy. Once they can learn to read, so they're learning to read. And really, children, when they want to learn to read, unless they're dyslexic, will learn to read, and I'll get to how we do that. If they're dyslexic, they need a little extra training. But if some children learn to read at 4, and some learn to read at 7. It's just, there's a span of when they're ready.
You see the same on the speaking front, and there's actually, you might think that the smart kids learn to speak earlier, and there's actually no evidence for that. So kids can vary substantially in the date at which they pick up language, at the date at which they formulate full sentences.
I wish you would talk to some of our parents who are panicked that their child isn't, it's like, if you'll just be patient, the child will come.
There's almost no children that don't develop language. It's such a universal human trait.
They're around all these peers who are helping them, and it's multi-age. So remember, you got older and younger, and they're mixing around, and you can't really tell who's the smartest because everyone's good at something. But the way we handle reading, and I've gotten criticism of this, is you can start with comic books or a magazine. And so, let's make them read the classics. And I said, if you make them read the classics, they will hate the classics. But what happens is...
Well, you can't have them read something that's too difficult for them right off. You have to... Then there's no reason not to use incremental move forward.
Let's read the Iliad at 6. It's like, okay. But once they start reading comic books and magazines, then all of a sudden you see them pick up Harry Potter. And then by 11 or 12, some are reading Democracy in America or War and Peace. Now, if you read that at 11 and 12, you need to read it at 21, 31, 41. But they love to read as a group. And so reading becomes something that's just
how successful, what's your failure rate on the literacy front, excluding the dyslexic kids? Well, we could talk about them too.
Zero.
It's zero.
Zero. It's zero.
And so what's your criteria for evaluating literacy, say, by the age of 10 or thereabouts?
So you read something, you get a badge for something called a deep book. You have to pitch the book as being, important, rated by experts. There's a whole criteria.
Right. So you teach them how to select good books.
Your classmates have to agree that it's a deep book. And then if it is, it goes on a list. So you can choose from the list, or you can pitch one that you like. But these are all real books. They're books that anybody. And so you have to read that book. You have to tell why it impacted you and whether you would recommend it to someone else. And that becomes a badge. That's probably like a 6-page thing that you create to try to pitch the book to someone else.
Right.
And so
how do we make a case for
how do we know that they're good? Is you look at the badges. Now, here's the thing. Who approves that badge, right? No adults in the room. Well, the answer is the standards of excellence are, if you've never done this before, did you put your heart into it?
Okay, so that's effort.
If you've done it once, is this time better than last time?
Right, great.
If you've done it enough times that it's hard to see the incremental gain because you've kind of plateaued, let's compare it, critique it to a master. How is your short story compared to Hemingway?
Right.
And if you win some sort of contest in the studio or an external contest, it's excellent. So Dr. Peterson signs off on my badges, excellent. Now, you're going to imagine with human nature, there's a little log rolling that's going to go on, right? We're buddies. I'm going to approve yours. You're going to approve mine.
Yeah, but if you're real buddies, you're not going to game the system so that the results are no longer good.
Yeah, but there are enough free riders, and so that starts to happen.
Yeah.
But there's an audit committee. So the audit committee will put out a survey that's anonymous every 6 weeks and say, whose badges should be audited? Oh. And you take those three, because who knows whose badges should be audited, right? The people in the room know. And you don't embarrass those people.
How do you stop that from turning into an informer festival and getting free riders on that front?
Well, I'll get back to kind of when you have toxic sub-tribes and things. So that can't, but generally the group is one tribe by this time, and so you don't really have that. That's not really tolerated by the group.
Okay.
But so what will happen is, who volunteers for the audit committee?
Yeah, well,
the tough people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the easy people don't want to do the work. So now you got the toughest judges. They'll take the 3 people that the studio said should be audited, and at random choose 3 more. Now, no one knows whether you were chosen at random or you were on the list. Kind of everybody probably knows, but then we're going to do a deep audit of those badges. If Jordan Peterson approved Jeff Sandifer's badge and it's rejected, then you lose a badge of the same value. So you just lost 6 weeks of work, and now all of your badges are going to be audited. So we've had learners.
Right. So you've got real strict. What would you call it? That's free rider control essentially.
Yeah.
So for those of you watching and listening, so the population prevalence of dark tetrad traits at a clinical level is about 4%, and so the dark tetrad is Machiavellian, narcissistic, psychopathic, and sadistic. And that cross-culturally, that seems to be about 1 person in 25 who's enough like that to be a serious problem. And they're basically, in the extreme, they're something like parasitic predators. And they'll game well-functioning systems to attract credit to themselves with no work. And so you always see, people think that societies can just be set up on a cooperative basis and that you can just assume the best about everyone and that'll work. And it does work 96% of the time, but it really doesn't work 4% of the time. And that 4% is toxic enough to bring the whole damn system crashing down. So you need to return tit for tat, essentially. There has to be control mechanisms set up in a well-functioning micro-society so that the free rider narcissist types can't get a toehold. And that takes a certain amount of tough-mindedness.
Yes.
Right. Often that's often the sort of thing that's lacking among the utopia-minded educational reformers, because they have we don't need competition in our schools, for example. Right. It's all cooperation. It's like, yeah, that's fine till the free riders come along, and then it's not fine at all.
You need justice and mercy.
Right, exactly.
You need both.
Yes,
So if you think about it, warm-hearted, tough-minded, the 360s, that's what we're measuring and encouraging and giving people. But you need this system of audit.
Right. Well, that's interesting that you use both warm-hearted and tough-minded, because that's reflection of a trait on the agreeable dimension. And agreeable people are compassionate and polite. They're maternal. That's really the right way of thinking about it. The kind of maternal that would be properly devoted to a very dependent infant. And so there's something lovely about that, right? As lovely as maternal love. But on the other end, which is the more masculine end, there's more, let's keep the free riders at bay, and then let's also only reward actual attainment.
Right.
And there's love in that too, but it's more like, it's the love of discipline and encouragement.
And those of us that are tough-minded, and I'm tough-minded and disagreeable, need to learn when to be warm-hearted.
Yeah.
And the ones that are too warm-hearted need to learn for their own good when to draw boundaries. That's what develops in all this. Now, by the way, we do see, for us, it's about 1 out of 100, we see highly toxic children come in. I can't explain why. I'm just telling you their behavior. I'm not saying they're damned or they're doomed. Because you can always actually be asked to leave the community and come back. You can repent. But you see every once in a while. Now, there's also often a strong correlation to the family once you listen, but sometimes not. You know? But that's the only time an adult will step in if they see that happening.
And what markers do you have for that?
They're telling very small lies, just like the dragon book.
Right.
You just can catch them, because otherwise the system will correct. But the system can't take someone who's smart enough to parse they're always staying right inside the lines. And they're lying little bits.
Right.
And so over time, the tribe will learn, even the young ones, to recognize that. But when you're fresh and new,
Yeah.
And so what an owner...
That's why psychopaths, like in the real world, psychopaths are itinerant.
Because they can't stay long enough.
Well, they can't stay because people figure out their games and then they stop them. And one of the problems with the virtual world right now is that it allows the psychopaths to be continually itinerant, which is essentially what you are if you're anonymous. Right. Is that nobody can get a handle on you. You can't track the reputation. And, the people who promote the benefits of online anonymity say, well, what about the heroic whistleblowers? And it's like, fair enough, but they're 1%.
Right.
Yeah, the heroic whistleblowers, but what about the enabled psychopaths? Well, the whistleblowing is worth the psychopathy. It's like, it doesn't look like it.
It's interesting because the group gets pretty good, even at an early age, of recognizing it, but the first time they see it, it's like when you said before about a dark triad or a dark quadrant male can take advantage of a young female, but the females will learn.
Yeah.
Well, 8-year-olds learn too.
Yeah.
But we will step in and say, here's a transition contract. If these things don't happen, you're going to need to leave and reapply. So we will pick out, but it's 1 out of 100.
Yeah, that's
we'll
pretty
see
good.
Someone who's, and so we're probably drawing, from some segment that's slightly healthier because they won't apply, maybe. But about 1 out of 100.
Well, you see with kids, so there's a pretty good literature on this. If you group 2-year-olds together and watch them interact, about 4% of the males, it's almost none of the females, about 4% of the males at age 2 will kick, hit, bite, and steal. Okay, so that's not very many. That's